the Villeneuve showing, located approximately 50 meters east of the east-west zone and approximately 500 meters east of SM 1901, which is the first hole MacDonald Mine drilled on the Scadding property. This trench here is part of the stripping program that MacDonald Mine has started in October 2019 and has exposed a sizable zone of chlorite alteration. Comparable to the other zone of the Scadding deposit, the chlorite alteration is principally distributed along a north-south structures located at the center of the trench, and chlorite alteration is utilizing the bedding in the sedimentary rock to expand away from the north-south structure to form a sizable zone of chlorite alteration. The attributes of this new showing on the Scadding property, and in terms of chlorite alteration, the surrounding sodic alteration is the classical alteration associated with gold mineralization on the Scadding property and has the potential to contain gold mineralization comparable to the other zone of the Scadding deposit. On this outcrop, we are going to be looking at some of the main factors that are controlling the geometry of the Scadding deposit and the distribution of gold in the different zones of mineralization that we are observing through the deposit. We are also going to be observing some of the key features that are characteristic of the Scadding deposit and the mineralization itself, but also of what is surrounding the mineralization and the zone of high-grade gold that we have been drilling in the Scadding deposit. What we can see here is a variable zonation in the rock and changes in colors that are signaling the interaction of these rocks with water. One of the main features that we are observing is the rock turning to that pinkish white color. And what this pinkish white color is are the zones of sodic alterations that are a critical component of the Scadding deposit. Sodic alteration is being formed when a lot of water with salt is circulating in the rock. The salt is going to be reacting with the host rock, and this is going to add sodium inside the rock, which is going to form this sodic alteration reflected by a mineral that we call albite. As alteration is progressing, it's going to evolve to this green alteration that we see here, which is a chlorite alteration, which is a direct host of gold mineralization inside the Scadding deposit. When we look especially how these things are distributed, we see on this outcrop that the chlorite alteration is forming a regular front that has a north-south orientation, and it's going to be forming zone of swelling, and locally it's going to be fingering, and then it's going to form zone of swelling again. And this is the characteristic features of the zones of mineralization that are present in the Scadding deposit. And in each of these zones, whether it's the swelling or the zone of fingering, high-grade mineralization can be present and show a special continuity between each of the different pierce point or drilling intersection that we can obtain in these zones. Now we're going to be moving to another outcrop where we're going to be seeing the next stage of evolution or the higher level of complexity that is characteristic of some of the mineralized zone of the Scadding deposit. Okay, now we're sitting on an outcrop where we see the north-south oriented structure that is controlling the distribution of the chlorite, which is all the green material that we can see on the outcrop. But also what this outcrop is exposing, it's exposing very well the higher level of complexity that is characteristic of the mineralized zone of the Scadding deposit. The north-south component that we see here is very important in order to bring the water that will form the chlorite and bring the gold in the system. But after, when this water is circulating along this north-south structure, some of the water and some of the fluids will come into the rock and will start expanding away from the north-south structures and form broad zone of chlorite alteration that are going to be containing variable amount of gold. As we're getting away from the north-south structures, what we can see is that the level of chlorite, the density of green on the outcrop is not as high as when we are getting very close to the zone, the north-south oriented structure that is the primary control on the distribution of that chlorite alteration. This outcrop is also very interesting for another reason. Historically, some people or some of the historic workers have been doing very selective channel sampling on the outcrop. Even though the channel sampling is covering a little fraction of the outcrop, this channel sampling allowed us to understand that this zone of chlorite alteration that we are observing carries up to 40 grams per ton gold in selective sampling. And now this is the zone that we will be calling the core shack zone, which has never been drilled before until we come on the property. We are now at the MacDonald Mines core shack, and we're looking at typical drill hole intersection that were obtained in the Scadding deposit. If we think about what we have seen on the outcrop, when we look at drill core, we see comparable relationship between the zone that surrounds the chloride zone and the zone of mineralization that we call the chloride zone. When we have a good chloride zone, what we typically see in the drill core, we will see the rock, initially pinkish white to white, turning into a dark green color. And within that rock that has a dark green color will be variably distributed sulfides. What a sulfide is a mineral that has sulfur in its structural formula. One of the most typical minerals we will see in this drill core is being called pyrite. Pyrite, which can be forming very big crystal, is an iron sulfide. It's a combination of iron and sulfur. This is forming the mineral we call pyrite. These pyrites are going to be variably distributed in the drill core, and they can come in association with other sulfides, one of which we call chalcopyrite. And chalcopyrite is a copper sulfide. It's copper, iron, and sulfur, which is forming a copper sulfide. These indicators are suggesting that we are sitting in a good chloride zone that is prospective for gold mineralization. The shoulders are going to be the sodic alteration, the zone where the rock is gaining sodium, and in the center is the zone rich in iron, which are forming the chloride zone. It's a very strong iron alteration, which is coming with variably distributed sulfides, the iron sulfides and the copper sulfides. Combined together, these are positive indicators of gold mineralization, leading to some occasions where there will be visible gold in the rock. If we think again about other gold deposits that are existing, the Scadding deposit differs from classical gold deposit with the respect that instead of having quartz vein that carries high-grade gold mineralization, in the case of the Scadding deposit, high-grade gold mineralization is occurring inside these chloride zone, which are dark green. But the comparison is the same. If we see a broad intersection of this dark green material, this is comparable in Timmins or in other gold camp to get a broad intersection rich in quartz vein that are carrying gold.